Hi there, hope you're well. This is Mr. Singleton from Outward Academy. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Science. We're just going to go through this lesson on cells. So, this is just the specification. This just goes through all the things that you need to know. You can get this online if you need to, if you're ever at home or in school and you want to have a look through, just go onto the internet, put in AQA, Science specification, and it will tell you most of the stuff that you need to know for your exams. So if you look through this very quickly, you have to be able to say or talk about the nucleus, cell membranes, mitochondria. You have to know about chloroplasts in plant cells, plasmids in bacteria cells, and those parts of an animal cell. So a nucleus, cytoplasm, cell membrane, mitochondria, ribosomes, chloroplast, vacuole, and cell wall. Okay. So I just want you to have a go at linking up these keywords. You may have done this in year 7 or in year 8, so we're just trying to build on some of that past information that you've got. So these words, so cell, tissues, and organ, they're mixed up, the meanings aren't. So the meaning for a cell is not a group of cells which work together to do a certain job. You've got to find the meaning within those 3 types. I will give you 3 minutes to try and write that down just quickly on a piece of paper. What are the meaning of those 3 words? Use the meaning box to help you. Off you go. Okay, you got 1 more minute left. Thirty more seconds. Right, let's see how you did. So a cell is the smallest building block of life. Basically, all living things are made up of cells. You're made up of about 37 trillion cells. A tissue is a group of cells which work together to do a certain job. So muscle is a type of tissue. It's made up of lots of muscle cells, which all stretch and contract and relax to therefore then move your arm and move your fingers. And then an organ is a group of tissues which then work together to do a certain job. So your heart has muscle tissues in it, has connective tissue in it, has nervous tissue in it, etc., to make an organ. So if you were ever asked to put these into a size order, the cell is the smallest, then a tissue, and then an organ. So we're going to look at cell structures today. You may have done some of this in year 7 and year 8, you may not have. So we're going to go through it from the start. So, challenge is to describe the structure of 2 types of cells called prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. And then the aspire is to explain the role of the different organelles. That's just a special word for the different parts of a cell. Okay, so let's get started with the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. So this is an example of this is a prokaryotic cell. It's a bacteria cell. Luckily for you, you don't need to know all those different parts of a prokaryotic cell. You'll need to know a couple of those. If you ever go into A level, though, you are required to know most of those on that picture: the capsule, the cell wall, the cell membrane, the flagellum, the ribosome, the chromosome, those types of bits. Now, the flagellum is quite interesting because that's not on all prokaryotic cells actually, but it is on some. It helps it to move around, a bit like a little tail for it. But all prokaryotic cells are generally smaller than the eukaryotic cells. So bacteria cells are generally a lot smaller than any of the human cells. They also do not have a nucleus. We'll talk about what a nucleus does a bit later on. But you need to know that they don't have a nucleus. And they have their DNA in little strands, or something called plasmids, a little circular piece of DNA, which actually is really useful for us when we're trying to make things like insulin or other genes that we want to replicate really quickly. So these are prokaryotic cells, generally bacteria cells, much smaller, no nucleus. Then their DNA is in little strands or little plasmids, little circular pieces of DNA. So that's your prokaryotic cell. Generally, we believe that these were the first types of life on Earth. This is where all life evolved from. And then it would have evolved into a different type of cell, which would have been eukaryotic cells. Now, this is probably more what you are used to seeing when we talk about cells, these little blobs of plant and animal cells. So eukaryotic cells are generally much larger than the prokaryotic cells. They also have a nucleus, so their DNA is inside another organelle or another part of a cell called a nucleus. And they have these little organelles, these parts of cells that have a membrane around them. So I want you to just think about how to, I'll show you how to do a Venn diagram, but I want you to just put in the similarities and the differences between those 2 types of cells. Here is a Venn diagram. So just draw 2 circles on a piece of paper or in your book. In one circle, make sure they overlap, In one circle, put prokaryotic cells. In the other circle, put eukaryotic cells. And in the prokaryotic cell, just by itself, put all the things that are in a prokaryotic cell or features of a prokaryotic cell. And then anything that's the same, that's found in both a eukaryotic cell and a prokaryotic cell, you can put in that overlapped bit. I'll give you another 3 minutes. Try and fill that bit in. Okay, you've got 1 more minute left. Thirty more seconds. Just think about the nucleus. Which one has a nucleus? Which one doesn't? Might be able to talk about types of organelles both of them have. Or you could look at if they have a cell membrane in them. Okay, let's have a look at one. So, answers. The differences. So, a prokaryotic, the DNA is free, so it doesn't have a nucleus. It contains plasmids, and it only has ribosomes in there. And you can put that they are smaller. Eukaryotic, the DNA is found in a nucleus. There's lots of organelles in there. You can put that it's larger. Similarities, if you wanted some similarities in there, they both contain something called a ribosome. They both contain a cell membrane. You can't put a cell wall because some animal cells don't have cell walls, or animal cells don't have cell walls at all. Okay, so we should be able to describe the structure of a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. If you go now and do your Google quiz, question 1 will just recap those bits for me. I will give you 5 minutes. Okay, you got 1 more minute left. Okay, right. So we're going to have a look at this next part. These are common exam questions, actually. So the different parts of a cell and what they. So there are two different types of eukaryotic cells, which I mentioned before: the plant and animal cells. Now, in year 7 and in year 8, you'll have talked about plants and animal cells with your teachers. So what I want you to do is see if you can remember how to draw a plant cell and how to draw an animal cell. And if you can label all the parts. I'm going to give you a bit of help, but I'll give you 5 minutes. Just do a rough drawing in your book, put the title, animal cell, and then draw that part. And then underneath that, put plant cell and draw that part. Make sure you use a pencil. Make sure you underline those subtitles. I'll give you 5 minutes. Draw a plant and animal cell. Okay, here's a bit for you if you need to. These are the different parts. Now, these are found in both plant and animal cells. You just need to be aware that in animal cells, 3 of those organelles or parts of cells you wouldn't find. So an animal cell only actually has 5 of those, and a plant cell has all 8. So you've got 1 more minute. Try and add those labels on. Right, let's see how you got on. So just a quick video and talk about animal and plant cells. So these are the eukaryotic cells that you need to know about. So generalized animal cells. Now there are lots of them that are very different, because obviously you can have ones which have a tail on and become very specialized, etc., etc. But general animal cell, in this sense of it, would generally have something called a nucleus, and that's where all the DNA is kept. And then this bit round here. So a plant cell. Now generally you will see a plant cell looking a little bit like a rectangle. Okay, again these can be specialized, so you'll have some So this is an animal cell on the left-hand side and the plant cell on the right-hand side. So an animal cell has a cytoplasm, a nucleus, a ribosome, mitochondrion or mitochondria if it's just by itself, and a cell membrane. And the bits that are just found in plants are the chloroplast, the vacuole, and the cell wall. So what you need to know, if you remember back to that beginning, is what these organelles do. So often one of the first couple of questions on the biology exam is label these parts of the cells, and then they might ask what each part does. So I was thinking about this using some pictures. So just keep an eye on your picture. Look at that bouncer there. He's a bit like the cell membrane. He's going to let things in and out of that cell. Now think about all the things that need to go into that animal cell. Well, every cell needs oxygen, so that has to get in. That will go through the cell membrane. Also, we'll need some water, and also some water will leave the cell, and that will go through the cell membrane. So just let certain things in and certain things out, but some things won't be able to get into that cell membrane. We call it semi-permeable or partially permeable. Some things are let in and some things aren't allowed in, basically because they're too big. So that is the cell membrane in a plant cell and in an animal cell. That's my bouncer. So the nucleus, really, really simple. It contains DNA. So remember we talked about that in prokaryotic cells. They don't have a nucleus. and the DNA is outside in plasmids. Well, the nucleus contains all the DNA in eukaryotic cells. So if you see that picture of DNA, just think nucleus, that's where it's all found. Ribosomes, they make protein. Sometimes you'll see this as something called protein synthesis. Now that word synthesis just means making. So think about what word that you know that has synthesis in. Well, the first one that comes to my mind is photosynthesis. That just means light making. So the word synthesis just means making. Ribosomes carry out protein synthesis. They make proteins. Picture there with lots of food with proteins in. Cytoplasm. This is where other chemical reactions take place. Now there's one chemical reaction that you can't mention, and that is aerobic respiration. But if you ever ask for an example, it's usually pretty rare, but you can say anaerobic respiration takes place in the cytoplasm. It's the liquidy part of the cell, main part of the cell really, and it's just all around the outside. It's all the bits where that hold in there. Now the mitochondria, that is where aerobic respiration happens. That releases energy for the cell. Now what you can't say is it makes energy. Okay, physics teachers would go mental with you for saying that, and you actually don't get credited for it in the exam. So you have to say releases energy by aerobic respiration, or you can save yourself all that and just put it's where aerobic respiration happens. So the chloroplast, if you remember back to the picture that we did right at the beginning of this part of the lesson, this was just in a plant cell. And the chloroplast has something called chlorophyll inside it, and that is what makes the plant green. And it also absorbs sunlight, so that's where photosynthesis occurs, in the chloroplast. Cell wall, again, only in a plant cell. It's made of something called cellulose, which is a sugar, which is made from photosynthesis. And that is there to support the cell. Now, this is a massive misconception. Lots and lots of students will put that an animal cell has a cell wall. Well, lots of animals have other ways to strengthen their bodies. If you think about the human body, it's got bones in there, and that's what supports the organism. If you think about trees that reach much, much higher than us, so 20, 30 feet, they don't have any bones to support them. So all their support is done through the cell wall and another organelle. It's all supported at what we call the cellular level. And that is this next one. The vacuole is filled with sap, and it also kind of supports and strengthens that cell to keep it upright and reach all those really high heights that trees can get to. But it's also filled with sap, which is a sugary solution. The sugar's made from photosynthesis. So I've got these pictures to try and help you whilst you're filling out your Google form. On that Google form, there's a couple of questions which are about all the organelles and what they do in there. So remember there are all the organelles. There's the 8 organelles. Try and answer your questions on the Google form, on the Google quiz there, and use these pictures to help you. Good luck. I'll give you 3 minutes because just a quick tick box. Just pick the right answer for those couple of questions. Good luck. Okay, you got 1 more minute left. I'd get those written down on a revision card if you wish. Pause the video and then write them down. Maybe make a diagram for these two cells, and then a quick revision card, or on the same revision card, the two types of cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells, and their differences.